Arthur Vance felt his life was becoming a collection of faded photographs. At 60, the world he had built with his wife, Eleanor, had lost its architect. She'd been gone for a little over a year, and her absence was a physical presence in their quiet suburban Ohio home, a hollow space in the bed next to him, an unnerving silence where her laughter used to be. The house, once a bustling hub of family life, was now just a two-story vessel for his memories, and even those were starting to feel unreliable, like old books with pages crumbling at the edges. He'd been a civil engineer, a man who built bridges, who understood stress points, load-bearing walls, and the unyielding logic of physics. His mind had always been his fortress, a place of blueprints and calculations. Now, that fortress felt besieged. He'd find himself standing in the kitchen, the refrigerator door open, with no memory of what he had come for. He'd misplace his keys, his wallet, the glasses perched right on top of his head. These were small things, the senior moments people joked about, but they felt like tremors before an earthquake. Was this grief, or was it the slow creeping fog of something worse? His 3 children worried, each in their own way. Sarah, his eldest, was a nurse practitioner in Cleveland, a 2-hour drive away. She called every day, her voice a blend of clinical concern and daughterly love. "Dad, are you eating properly? Did you remember to take your blood pressure medication? Maybe you should think about getting one of those pill organizers." Her worry was a heavy blanket, warm but suffocating. Mark, his youngest, lived a world away in San Diego, working as a financial analyst. His concern was expressed in spreadsheets and phone calls about long-term care insurance. He was practical, less emotional. "Dad, we need a plan. Statistically, a man your age, living alone, the risks are significant. We should look at downsizing, maybe a condo with some assisted living options." And then there was Kevin. Kevin, his middle child, was a storm. At 35, he had all of Arthur's ambition, but none of his patience. He worked in high-pressure sales, a job that suited his slick charm and relentless drive. He had always been the one to push the limits, the one who saw rules as mere suggestions. His life had recently imploded in a spectacular fashion. A messy divorce, the result of him cheating on his wife, Laura, had left him with a bruised ego and an empty apartment. He was adrift, and like a ship seeking a port in a storm, he turned toward home. "Dad, I'm worried about you here all alone," Kevin had said, his voice dripping with manufactured sincerity as they sat at the familiar oak dining table. "Let me move in for a while. I can help out, cook for you, make sure you're taking your meds. I can work from home mostly. It'll be good for both of us." Arthur, lonely and feeling the weight of his own perceived decline, had agreed. A part of him was relieved to have the hum of another person in the house, to not have to face the echoing silence alone. He hadn't seen this as a rescue mission for Kevin. He saw it as one for himself. He didn't realize he was inviting the fox into the henhouse. He still couldn't have known that this single decision was the first move in a game he didn't even know he was playing. The first few weeks were a blur of deceptive comfort. Kevin was the model of a prodigal son returned to the fold. He cleaned the gutters, mowed the lawn, and filled the kitchen with the aroma of home-cooked meals. He'd sit with Arthur in the evenings, watching old movies, regaling him with stories from work, always careful to paint himself as the hard-working hero. He sorted Arthur's pills into a weekly organizer with a flourish of efficiency. "See, Dad, no more forgetting." But beneath the surface of this newfound domestic harmony, tiny dissonances began to appear. Arthur had a small safe in his study where he kept important documents and a cash reserve, about $10,000 he'd set aside from the sale of his vintage Mustang a few years back. It was his emergency fund, a secret comfort. One afternoon he went to count it, a habit of his, and found it short by $200. He counted it again, and again. The number was the same. His first thought was a jolt of self-doubt. Did I take some out? Maybe I bought something and forgot. I've been so forgetful lately. He tried to retrace his steps, but his mind was a frustrating blank. He decided not to mention it to Kevin. What would he say? Accuse his helpful son of theft? It seemed absurd, a paranoid delusion of a failing mind. So he pushed the thought away, blaming the fog that seemed to be thickening around him. But how could he be sure his own mind wasn't the one betraying him? Kevin, meanwhile, was becoming more and more indispensable. He managed Arthur's appointments, screened his calls, and even started doing the grocery shopping. "You just relax, Dad." "Let me handle it," he'd say with a warm, reassuring smile. The smile didn't quite reach his eyes. The fog in Arthur's head grew worse. The mornings were the worst part. He'd wake up feeling groggy, as if he hadn't truly slept, his thoughts moving like they were wading through mud. The world seemed slightly out of focus. His short-term memory, once just spotty, was now a sieve. He'd forget entire conversations he'd had with Sarah on the phone just an hour earlier. During one call, she grew frantic. "Dad, we just talked about this. Dr. Miller's appointment is on Tuesday, not Thursday. Kevin had to call me and fix it. Are you okay?" Arthur felt a hot flush of shame. He wasn't okay. He was losing himself piece by piece, and his son was the sole witness to his disintegration. Kevin was always there to pick up the pieces, to gently correct him, his brow furrowed with the perfect amount of concern. "It's all right, Dad," he'd say, placing a hand on Arthur's shoulder. "That's what I'm here for." The conversations about the house began subtly. "This is a big place, Dad." Lots of upkeep, Kevin would mention while fixing a leaky faucet. Or, "The property taxes on this place are insane. You're pouring money into a house that's half empty." Soon the hints became proposals. One evening, Kevin spread a series of glossy brochures across the coffee table. They were for luxury assisted living communities, places with names like Willow Creek Estates and Golden Horizon. They looked like resorts, but to Arthur they looked like prisons. "Dad, we need to be realistic," Kevin said, his voice low and serious. "Your memory, it's getting worse. What if you have a fall? What if you forget to turn off the stove? I can't be here 24/7. We need a long-term solution." Arthur stared at the smiling seniors in the brochures, playing shuffleboard and taking watercolor classes. He felt a cold dread creep up his spine. This house was his last connection to Eleanor, to the life they had built. "I'm not leaving my home," Arthur said, his voice firmer than he felt. Kevin sighed, a theatrical display of exhausted patience. "I'm not trying to kick you out, Dad. I'm trying to protect you, and to protect your assets." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "If you have to go into a full-time nursing home down the line, they'll take everything. They'll take the house, all of your savings. Everything you and Mom worked for will be gone." It was a classic scare tactic, preying on a common fear of the elderly. "But if," Kevin continued, "you sign the house over to me now, it's protected. It'll be in my name, safe and sound. I'll make sure you can live here as long as you want, I swear. It's just a legal precaution, a way to keep what's yours in the family." He made it sound so logical, so responsible, a simple transfer of a deed to protect a lifetime of work. To an outside observer, it was the act of a prudent, caring son. To Sarah and Mark, whom Kevin called later that week, it sounded like a drastic but possibly necessary step. "He had to remind Dad 3 times to take his heart medication yesterday," Kevin told them, his voice heavy with feigned worry. "He left the back door wide open all night. I'm scared for him. From hundreds of miles away, what could they do but trust the man on the ground? They urged caution, but they agreed to a family video call to discuss it. The trap was being set, the legal paperwork was being drawn up, and Kevin was confident his confused, forgetful father would soon sign away his entire world. He was sure the old man couldn't see the bars of the cage being built around him. But he had forgotten one crucial thing about his father. An engineer never stops analyzing the structures around him, especially when he feels one beginning to fail. The turning point wasn't a dramatic event. It was a cup of chamomile tea. Arthur had been feeling particularly sluggish one Tuesday afternoon. His head was thick with a persistent cottony fog that made simple thoughts feel like complex equations. Kevin had made him lunch, a hearty soup and a sandwich, followed by his customary cup of tea, which Kevin insisted helped him relax. "Here you go, Dad. This will help you settle." Arthur took the mug into his study, intending to read the paper. But he got distracted by an old photo of him and Eleanor on their wedding day. He set the tea down on his desk untouched and lost himself in the memory. An hour later, he was startled by a call from Sarah. They spoke for nearly 30 minutes, and for the first time in weeks, his mind felt clear. The words came easily. He remembered the details of their last conversation. The fog had lifted. After the call, his eyes fell on the now cold cup of tea. He stared at it, a strange sense of unease prickling his skin. It was the only thing different about his routine today. He hadn't drunk the tea, and his mind was clear. Could it be that simple? The thought was monstrous, a dark seed of suspicion that he almost dismissed as paranoia. Kevin, his own son. But the clarity he felt was undeniable. It was like a window being wiped clean after months of grime. He stood up and walked into the kitchen. On the counter next to the chamomile tea box was a small, unmarked bottle of liquid dropper, the kind used for herbal supplements. Kevin had told him it was a calming blend of valerian root and melatonin to help him sleep better. Arthur had never questioned it. Now he looked at it as if it were a venomous snake. With trembling hands, he took a clean spoon from the drawer. He went back to his study, dipped the spoon into the cold tea, and sealed the small wet sample in a plastic sandwich bag. He hid the bag in the back of his sock drawer behind a collection of old tie clips. It was a small act of defiance, a desperate grasp for certainty. This was the moment the old Arthur Vance, the engineer who trusted logic and evidence above all, began to re-emerge from the haze. He knew he was on the brink of a horrifying discovery, but he had to know the truth. Was he losing his mind, or was he being robbed of it? His first move was a test. He needed to confirm the theft. The next morning, before Kevin was awake, Arthur went to his safe. He carefully took out a single $100 bill from the stack. He took a fine-tipped pen and, in the blank space next to Benjamin Franklin's portrait, he drew a tiny, almost invisible star. He placed the bill on top of the pile and put the stack back in the safe, making sure it looked untouched. Then he began his performance. Throughout the day, he was more forgetful than ever. He lost his glasses twice, asked Kevin the same question about the weather 3 times, and pretended to be confused about what day it was. He drank the tea Kevin gave him, but secretly only pretended to sip, pouring most of it down the sink when Kevin wasn't looking. He needed to maintain the illusion of his decline while his mind, now clear and sharp, worked furiously in the background. 2 days later, the marked bill was gone. The final piece of doubt in Arthur's mind crumbled into dust, replaced by an ice-cold certainty. His son was not only stealing from him, but was actively incapacitating him to do so. This wasn't just greed, it was a profound and cruel betrayal. It was an act of war. And Arthur Vance, a man who had spent his life building things to withstand immense pressure, would not collapse. He would fight back, but not with anger and accusations. No, that's what Kevin would expect. He would fight like an engineer. He would use a blueprint. His plan began to form, a complex and multi-layered strategy that required patience, precision, and an unshakable nerve. He had to continue playing the part of the befuddled old man, all while secretly gathering the materials for his counteroffensive. His next trip was to the public library. He told Kevin he wanted to get some new mystery novels, a plausible excuse. Once there, he didn't go to the fiction section. He went to the public computers. His fingers, which had felt clumsy and slow for months, moved with a renewed purpose across the keyboard. He researched private investigators, elder law attorneys, and most importantly, small, undetectable recording devices. He paid for a tiny audio recorder with a debit card linked to a bank account Kevin didn't know he had, and had it shipped to a P.O. box he opened that same afternoon. A week later, he made an appointment with his longtime physician, Dr. Chen, for a routine checkup. Kevin insisted on driving him. "I should be there, Dad, to make sure you remember everything he says." "Of course, son," Arthur said meekly. "That would be a big help." In the waiting room, Arthur excused himself to use the restroom. The tea sample, still sealed in the plastic bag, was in his coat pocket. He had another fresh sample from that morning's cup in a small vial. Once inside, he took them out. He knew he couldn't give them directly to Dr. Chen with Kevin hovering nearby. He had to trust his doctor. On the back of one of his business cards, he wrote a short, desperate message. "Dr. Chen, please test this for benzodiazepines or any non-prescribed sedatives. This is urgent and confidential. I will explain later. Please signal with a nod if you understand. Do not speak of this. My son is with me." Back in the exam room, Kevin dutifully recounted Arthur's symptoms to the doctor. The memory loss, the confusion, the fatigue. Arthur sat quietly, playing his part. As Dr. Chen prepared to take his blood pressure, Arthur reached into his pocket as if to get a tissue. His hand brushed against the doctor's. In that brief, fumbled moment, he passed the folded business card and the small, concealed plastic bag into Dr. Chen's hand. Dr. Chen didn't flinch. His expression remained professional and calm. He continued the exam, asking Arthur a series of standard questions. Then, as he listened to Arthur's heart with his stethoscope, he looked him directly in the eye and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Relief washed over Arthur so intensely he felt lightheaded. He had an ally. The first gear of his intricate machine had just clicked into place. The next piece of his plan was the most difficult: communicating with Sarah and Mark. He couldn't risk a phone call. Kevin was always listening, always present. An email was too risky as well. Kevin had helped him set up his laptop and certainly knew his password. He needed an old-fashioned, untraceable method. He began writing a letter. Not a single letter, but 3 identical copies. It was a detailed, heartbreaking account of everything: the stealing, the suspicions about the tea, his visit to Dr. Chen, his plan to feign compliance with Kevin's scheme. He included the number for his new P.O. box. He told them he was orchestrating a surprise of his own. He asked them to arrange a surprise family visit for the following Saturday, the day Kevin had scheduled for the lawyer to come over to sign the house deed. He instructed them to act completely normal on the phone, to go along with whatever Kevin said, to feign concern for their failing father. He ended the letter with a plea. "Trust me, I am not the man my brother is describing to you. I am your father, and I need your help to save our family." Mailing the letters was a covert operation. One afternoon, under the guise of taking a walk for his health, something Dr. Chen had insisted on. He walked not to the park but 10 blocks in the opposite direction to a post office in the next town over. The walk was arduous, but with every step he felt his strength returning. He was no longer a victim. He was an architect, building a trap with the patience and precision of a master craftsman. With the letters sent and the audio recorder secretly taped under the lip of the kitchen table, all Arthur could do was wait and play his part. He became the epitome of a man succumbing to his own frailty. He agreed with Kevin that signing over the house was for the best. He sounded confused during phone calls with Sarah and Mark, who played their roles perfectly, expressing their reluctant agreement with Kevin's plan. Kevin was ecstatic. He was strutting around the house like a king who had just secured his throne. He was condescending, overly solicitous, and utterly convinced of his own genius. He had successfully manipulated everyone: his father, his siblings, the lawyer, the house, the money. It was all about to be his. He saw his father not as a person, but as a final obstacle, a rickety old door he just had to push through one last time. He never once thought to check if the door was rigged with explosives, and Saturday was just 2 days away. Saturday morning arrived, painted in the bright, cheerful hues of a perfect early autumn day. The air was crisp, the sky a brilliant, cloudless blue. Inside the Vance home, however, the atmosphere was thick with a tension that was almost palpable. Kevin was a whirlwind of nervous energy, pacing the living room, straightening already perfect cushions, and checking his reflection in the hallway mirror. His lawyer, a prim man named Mr. Davies, was due to arrive at 11, along with a notary public. Kevin had dressed for the occasion in a crisp shirt and slacks, the uniform of a man about to close a very important deal. Arthur sat in his favorite armchair, a worn leather throne that held the faint scent of Eleanor's perfume. He appeared calm, almost vacant. He wore a simple cardigan and slippers, looking every bit the part of the frail patriarch ready to be put out to pasture. But beneath the placid surface, his mind was a furiously spinning engine of calculations and contingencies. The audio recorder was active under the table. Dr. Chen's lab results were in a sealed envelope in his pocket, and he was counting the minutes until Sarah and Mark were scheduled to arrive for their surprise. "How are you feeling, Dad?" Kevin asked, his voice oozing a syrupy concern that made Arthur's skin crawl. "Big day today. Just a few signatures and all our worries will be over." "My worries or your worries, Kevin?" Arthur murmured just loud enough to be heard. Kevin froze for a second, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face before being replaced by a patient smile. "Our worries, Dad. We're a team." He patted Arthur's shoulder, a gesture that was meant to be reassuring but felt proprietary. The doorbell rang at precisely 11 o'clock. Mr. Davies and the notary, a stern-looking woman, were ushered in. Paperwork was placed on the polished dining room table. The stage was set. Mr. Davies began to explain the legal documents in a dry monotone, detailing the transfer of the deed for the property from Arthur Vance to Kevin Vance, for the sum of $1 and other good and valuable consideration. Arthur listened, nodding slowly, his eyes distant. He asked a few clarifying questions, his voice deliberately weak and reedy, reinforcing the image of a man who didn't fully comprehend the magnitude of what he was doing. Kevin sat beside him, projecting an air of solemn responsibility, occasionally leaning over to say, "It's okay, Dad. Mr. Davies is just explaining the formalities. I've been over all of it." Just as the notary was uncapping her pen, the doorbell rang again. Kevin shot up, his face a mask of irritation. Who could that be? "I told everyone we'd be busy this morning." He opened the door to find Sarah and Mark standing on the porch, bearing a large basket of fruit and even larger guilt-ridden smiles. Surprise, they chimed, their voices a little too loud, a little too cheerful. Kevin was momentarily thrown. "What are you guys doing here?" "We wanted to surprise Dad," Sarah said, bustling past him, "and to be here for, for support." Mark followed, his eyes finding Arthur's across the room. He gave a nearly imperceptible nod. The final pieces were in place. "Well, this is unexpected," Kevin stammered, trying to regain control. "But good. It's good you're here. You can see for yourselves that this is the right thing to do." He led them to the dining room, where the lawyer and notary waited impatiently. The atmosphere was now charged with a new dynamic. The quiet, solemn proceeding had become a family affair. "Okay," Kevin said, rubbing his hands together. "Let's get this done. Dad, you just need to sign here and here." He pointed to the lines on the document with a pen. Arthur picked up the pen. His hand trembled, whether from age or adrenaline, no one could tell. He looked at the paper, then at Kevin, then at Sarah and Mark, who watched him with anxious eyes. He held the pen over the signature line for a long, silent moment, and then he set it down. "I don't think I'll be signing this today," Arthur said. His voice was different. The reedy, weak tone was gone, replaced by a quiet, solid strength that filled the room. It was the voice of the engineer, the bridge builder, the voice of their father. Kevin stared at him, bewildered. "Dad, what are you talking about? We've been through this. You're confused." "No, son," Arthur said, his gaze locking onto Kevin's. "For the first time in a very long time, I am not confused at all." He reached into his cardigan pocket and pulled out the small, powerful audio recorder, placing it on the table. He pressed play. Kevin's voice filled the room, slick and manipulative, captured in crystal-clear audio from the day before. "Just a simple signature, Dad. It's to protect you. Don't worry about the legal stuff. I've got it all handled. You know you can't keep track of these things anymore." A collective gasp came from Sarah and Mark. The lawyer, Mr. Davies, paled slightly. Kevin's face went from confusion to crimson rage. "What is this? Are you recording me?" "I am," Arthur said calmly. He then pulled out a small stack of $100 bills and fanned them on the table. Each one had a tiny, hand-drawn star next to the portrait. "I also started marking the money in my safe. It's funny how these specific bills kept disappearing, only to reappear in your wallet when you thought I was asleep." Kevin was speechless, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "But the money, that was the least of it," Arthur continued, his voice hardening. He pulled the sealed envelope from his other pocket and slid it across the table to Sarah. "Open it." Sarah's hands trembled as she tore it open. It was a toxicology report from Dr. Chen's lab. She read it aloud, her voice cracking. "Specimen contains elevated levels of lorazepam and diphenhydramine, substances not prescribed to the patient, consistent with repeated non-medical administration." "In English, please," Arthur said, his eyes never leaving Kevin's. "My son has been drugging my tea for weeks, making me groggy, confused, forgetful, making my dementia worse so that my other children and my lawyer would believe I was incompetent enough to sign away my home." The room fell into a stunned, horrified silence. Mark stared at his brother, his face a mixture of disgust and disbelief. Sarah was openly weeping. Mr. Davies began discreetly packing his briefcase, his professional demeanor evaporating. "Dad, it's not what you think," Kevin stammered, his bravado shattered, revealing the pathetic, greedy man beneath. "I was just trying to help you relax, to manage your finances." "You were trying to steal my home, my money, and my mind," Arthur declared, his voice ringing with righteous fury. He stood up, no longer stooped but tall and straight. You saw your father not as a man to be respected, but as a problem to be solved, an asset to be liquidated. You thought my grief had made me weak. You were wrong." He looked at Kevin, his expression not of hate, but of profound, sorrowful disappointment. "You are not a son. You are a predator, and your hunt is over." The finality in his words hung in the air, absolute and unbreakable. Kevin, cornered and exposed, finally collapsed into a chair, his face in his hands, the architect of his own spectacular ruin. The truth, like a well-designed structure, had borne the weight of his lies and had not buckled. In the aftermath of the reveal, there was no shouting, no immediate call to the police. The raw, ugly truth had sucked all the air out of the room. Mr. Davies and the notary excused themselves with hurried apologies, eager to escape the blast radius of the imploding family. That left Arthur, his 3 children, and the wreckage of Kevin's betrayal. The decision of what to do next was not Arthur's alone. He saw the anguish on Sarah's and Mark's faces, guilt for having been deceived, horror at what Kevin had done, and a flicker of sorrow for the brother they thought they knew. Calling the police would mean prison, a permanent public severing of family ties. It felt too simple and perhaps too cruel. Arthur didn't want revenge. He wanted a resolution, a true, lasting one. They sat Kevin down at the table, the unsigned legal documents a testament to his failed coup. He was a deflated man, stripped of his charm and his lies, leaving only a hollow shell of entitlement and desperation. "Here are your choices, Kevin," Arthur said, his voice steady. Sarah and Mark stood behind him, a united front. "Option 1. We hand over all of this evidence, the recordings, the lab reports, the marked bills, to the police. You will be charged with theft, elder abuse, and assault. You will go to jail." Kevin flinched as if struck. "Option 2, Arthur continued, "you will check yourself into a residential treatment facility, not a 2-week spa, but a long-term program for behavioral and psychological therapy. You will address your pathological greed and your complete lack of empathy. You will sign a legal document, drawn up by a lawyer of my choosing, relinquishing any and all future claim to my estate. You will have no inheritance. Your share will be donated to a charity for the victims of elder abuse." It was a form of poetic justice. He wouldn't be a prisoner of the state, but he would be a prisoner of his own rehabilitation, forced to confront the ugliness within himself. The choice was between a physical cage and a psychological one. Defeated and broken, Kevin agreed to the second option. The next few days were a blur of legal meetings and phone calls. A new trust was established with Sarah and Mark as co-trustees, ensuring Arthur's assets were protected and his wishes would be honored. Kevin, silent and ashen-faced, was driven by Mark to a facility 3 states away. There were no tearful goodbyes. In the weeks that followed, the house began to feel like a home again. The oppressive fog of Kevin's presence lifted, and with it the artificially induced fog in Arthur's mind. He felt sharper, more engaged, more like himself than he had in over a year. Sarah and Mark, consumed by a need to make amends for their doubt, became more present than ever. Sarah drove down every weekend, filling the house with her warmth and the smell of her baking. Mark set up a system so he could work remotely from Ohio for 1 week out of every month. They talked, truly talked, for the first time in years. They shared memories of Eleanor, they worked in the garden together, and they rebuilt the foundations of their family, this time on solid ground. Arthur proved that true strength isn't the absence of vulnerability, but the courage to fight through it. He had faced the ultimate betrayal and had not only survived but had re-engineered his own life, turning a plot of destruction into a blueprint for a new beginning. So he proved that the sharpest minds are often hidden behind the quietest faces, and the most important battles are fought not with fists, but with wisdom and foresight. Do you think he made the right choice for his son? Or should he have pursued a harsher justice? Let us know what you would have done in the comments below. We're always fascinated to read your perspectives. And of course, if you appreciated Arthur's story, please give this video a like and subscribe for more tales of hidden strength and unexpected victory.